You have a two-step process. Step one, overhaul the labor market, the housing market, and the criminal justice system. Step two, redistribute wealth. Step three, equality.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm living it up. We got Valentine's this weekend on Monday. We got Super Bowl this weekend. Just so much to look forward to.
And there's the pod. I look forward to the pod.
Oh, of course. The glory that is.
I think I look forward to listener mail, actually.
Well, so we talked about Meta. We've dropped Meta a few times, but we talked about how Meta is getting hit lately, right?
Yeah.
We got some listener mail from Henry this week. It's a tweet from Aaron Levie, who's the CEO of Box. So Aaron Levie is just hilarious, by the way. I can tell a little short anecdote there, but Aaron Levie is hilarious. But what this tweet is so someone tweeted out how Meta, fell below $600 billion in market cap.
Yeah.
And in the congressional hearings, like all the stuff they're putting together at Congress is saying that that's the threshold for when like they care about what you're doing with regard to
interesting.
Antitrust.
I don't know about that.
Stuff. Yeah. So anyway, so someone tweeted that out, and Aaron Levie just tweeted out, Zuck is always 3 steps ahead. And so he's like a really funny guy, but his humor is like typically like you could take it seriously, but it's also, kind of a joke. Yeah. But it is if you follow the thread, so we can retweet this. If you follow the thread down, it is like a mix of people being like, he's so brilliant, like best operator ever. And, but anyway, I thought that was great. Thanks for sending that in. It's hilarious and a good follow-up. So,
well, hold on. I got a tweet about the metaverse that ties right in.
Oh, go for it.
Just spent 25 minutes waiting for my doctor to figure out how to join a Zoom call after 2 years of this. I'm sure the metaverse is going to happen. Right?
There it is. Yeah, we can't even figure out how to click the enter the Zoom button. And this is going off of what we talked about, how like Linden Lab, his Second Life has been trying this for 20 years.
It's been around for 20 years.
Yeah. Anyway, fishbowl time. Where should we go?
Oh, I think you have some knowledge to drop, if I remember correctly.
Oh, you want the follow-up? Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. So last week, I was talking about how it's important to stay invested and looked at about 20 years of historical returns from VTI, which is Vanguard's total stock market index. And the way I looked at it was I said, if you start taking away the highest return days day by day, you start to lose a lot of your return. And Skippy rightfully was like, well, we got to look at the mirror of that as well. Like, what if you get out of the market and you miss the lowest return days? Like, what happens then? So I went back and took a look, and it is a mirror, effectively. So you're right to ask. So what happens? And I won't give as many stats as I gave last time, but if you're out for the lowest return day, you gain about 13% more return. If you're out for the top 10, you gain 131% basically more return. So it is nice. You start to reverse it. Now, I still stand by like the rationale for showing that is like, who knows what the heck days you're gonna miss out on. And so because many of these days, both the lowest and the highest happen in 2008 over that 20-year period, like many of them. And so you're just like, double Dutch, which day am I getting into or getting out of? Or you just stay in and reap all the rewards.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, there's no real way to dodge the drawdowns without missing some of the massive gains and vice versa, because sometimes it's the market overreacting to, quote unquote news, but it's just the way the panic happens. So, but it's interesting, isn't it? That missing the bottom 10 days like has such a drastic impact. It's nice to prove that hypothesis. So that's what I thought would happen, but I wasn't really sure.
Yeah. And it kind of, I was saying stay invested is like the takeaway that I have. But even the other thing that we've like discussed is how little, I'll call it little things make a big difference. Meaning here, like there are small volume of stocks that make up a lot of returns. There are small volume of days that make up the highest returns. There's small volume of days that make up the lowest returns.
Yeah.
Otherwise, things go back and forth. It's like it continues to fascinate me, that fact. Like it is, we get these big booms, big busts. Most of the time, nothing happens, right? Like a net, nothing happens. But then, yeah, it's really fascinating. I love this stuff.
Well, I mean, think about it. If on average the stock market's up somewhere around 10% a year, and it can be between 7% to 10%, depending on what we're looking at, time frame and stuff, right? If you have one day that goes up 2 to 4%, like that's a huge chunk of your total gains for the year. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, wild. All right, where should we go next?
This is just another great example of you never know what you're going to get on the Skippy and Doogles show, right? I found this in the New York Times this week, and I just think this is fascinating. But I will turn some of this into a quiz, Doogles. How long is the typical semi in the United States of America?
Like the truck itself?
The
40 feet.
Tractor trailer. What do they call it? The thing they're pulling.
40 feet.
53 feet. I thought you'd know that one. You need a road trip more. Almost
specifically with a 53 foot.
Almost all the containers say 53 feet on them.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
So we got these guys and girls driving around 53 feet long containers all over the U.S. 5 years ago, we told them all this was a horrible job and they were going to be replaced by robots. It seems, at least like the Wall Street Journal seemed to do that. And then the last 18 months, Doogles, we've been saying, where are all the truckers? We need more truck drivers. This is horrible. Our supply chain is wrecked. What's going on here? So here's a few facts. Any guess how many times around the world your average trucker drives in a year?
0.
Figuratively, of course.
Oh, okay. 3.
It's 5. They drive 400 to 700 miles a day for a typical yearly total of 125,000 miles. It's a lot, man.
Wild. Oh my goodness.
Crazy. Through traffic and weather and everything else. Typical work week is about 65 hours of driving, and they're on the road 300 days a year. Like, I don't know the best way to say this because I want to be articulate, but if I'm working 65-hour weeks, 300 days a year, I think I'm going to be worn out at the end of the year, man. That's a lot.
Yeah. Is that how far off from your normal work schedule is that?
Actually true. I guess I think of like being on the road differently than like,
if I'm driving for
that's
65 hours a week, 300 days a year. I'm not. Like I could not do that. Like mad respect to the people that can. I could not do that.
That's what I mean to say, actually. It's a different type of work.
Lactic acid in my legs. I don't know, or whatever. My back would probably be hurt.
My back would be done. I like wouldn't be able to walk after the third week. Any guess on how many truck drivers are women?
10%.
Good. About 7%. And bring it home with annual pay.
We like 45-ish, 50-ish. I really thought this was like 75, 80, but no.
According to this article, it says median annual pay of a tractor trailer driver who are typically paid by miles is about $47,000 as of May 2020. Now, right now, you can get a signing bonus of around $100K, but you're not...
Wait, a signing bonus of $100K?
Or sorry, I misspoke. A signing bonus of $10K. A signing bonus of $10K. You're not in the upper echelon of earners. And that's a lot of time. Like, just, if you're on the road 300 days a year, you're effectively traveling 300 days a year. The professions I'm used to in my daily life that travel that much are more consulting, and you're rewarded for it.
Yeah. Sales, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're right. Business development. I don't know. Just random facts that I found interesting and I'm processing. So
Thanks for dropping that.
Crazy.
And going to the shortage piece that you brought up earlier, it makes me think. I read this Atlantic article this week that was talking about something completely different, but it was talking about how, have you seen that Letterman clip, the Letterman Bill Gates clip from the mid 90s?
Yeah.
That's sent around, right? So it brought that up and how it's like no one believed in the web in the mid 90s. Look at Letterman. Because Letterman's everybody, I guess.
I mean,
and
Letterman
then,
was having fun too, but
exactly. Yeah, I mean, he's Letterman. Like,
yeah.
And then I was saying, so now look at how people are treating Web3, right? If people didn't, so analogy, people didn't believe in the web, it took off. People don't believe in Web3. If you don't believe in things, they take off.
They take off always.
Yeah, they take off. So anyway, but I bring this back because of the whole trucker shortage thing you brought up. Is like you never know where trends are going to end up going, because it was 5 years ago, right, when people were like, get out of trucking, it's going to be automated, like where are the truckers? And now, why are you truckers? And now where are the truckers, for what you were saying? You just never know what the environment, economics, et cetera, is going to end up bringing. And so it might have seemed like an obvious bet a few years ago to bet on, there are like autonomous trucking, right, organizations like that are building those. And I'm not saying that they're bad ideas to invest in, but it like probably seemed obvious to people back then that by now they would be everything, right? Like they'd be everywhere. It's hard to predict this stuff. All right, I'm gonna dip in. Is that cool?
Yeah,
if I dip
go
in?
for it, please.
I want to dip in and talk about the former mayor of Stockton. So his name is Michael Tubbs, former mayor of Stockton. And the reason I want to talk about him is because he is a big proponent of guaranteed income. And he launched this organization this past week called End Poverty in California. And we've discussed inequality a good amount in the pod. So I found this interesting. I was reading this Fast Company article that introduced Michael Tubbs to me. And then it took me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So I'll talk a little bit about the pilot that he ran when he was mayor of Stockton. And then I want to drop a couple more pieces of info, and then I want to get your reaction. So when Michael Tubbs was the mayor of Stockton, he ran this pilot that was a guaranteed income pilot. And what they did was they distributed $500 a month for 24 months to 125 people. It was unconditional. It was like, you can get the money, you can do whatever you want with it, right? No strings attached. And the people that it was given to were randomly selected, right? So they were randomly selected, but they had to be from neighborhoods where you were below like the median income in Stockton. And so that's the pilot. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So a couple of the outcomes. So they ran this for a year. Recipients obtained full-time employment at more than twice the rate of non-recipients. Recipients were less anxious and depressed, both over time and compared to the control group. Recipients saw statistically significant improvements in emotional health, fatigue levels, and overall well-being. And recipients had a greater ability to pay for unexpected expenses, which was particularly important as the research period covered concluded just as the pandemic began. So we ran this for a year. They gave out $500 and said, had some good results. I'll pause there. Thoughts on guaranteed income?
It's such a, I mean, I'm not going to give a soundbite here. It's such a complex thing. I would say I encourage people to experiment and get more data around it, because I think there's some potential there, but it's really hard to implement. I mean, I think it's really hard to fairly implement.
I fully agree. And I really enjoy seeing the pilots that folks are running, because this stuff is so hard. I'll give you a little piece of info, or like quote, I should say, that shows how hard this is. And then I'm going to drop a couple more pieces of other stuff that I've read that I think is interesting. Okay. So in the same Fast Company article, they mentioned David Grusky, or maybe David Grusky, who's the director of Stanford's Center on Poverty and Inequality. So what what I'm about to say reminded me of, those memes that are always like, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, profit. And like steps 1 and 2 are like, so this guy means well, and I didn't read much into this. I'm just taking what Fast Company said. But what David Grusky said was that we have these racist institutions that are in our country. He named the labor market, the housing market, and the criminal justice system specifically, right? Mm-hmm. And so he went, redistributing wealth is like a way for us to get out of inequality, but that's step 2. Step 1 is overhaul those institutions. Oh, yeah, sure. Like, so you have a two-step process. Step one, overhaul the labor market, the housing market, and the criminal justice system. Step two, redistribute wealth. Step three, equality.
It's just a 3-step plan, Diggle. Sounds pretty
That's
simple
it.
to me. I mean,
That's it. I mean, if this is what Stanford's coming up with, then but anyway, I'm sure that there's like more to that. But from the Fast Company article, I was like, how is that the two-pronged approach that you just came up with? Like overhaul I'm look, let's work to like revamp the systems and make them more
they
equitable.
should be more fair and equitable.
That can't be step one in a process where you're trying to get to something else, like in your lifetime, especially. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. I'll bring up a couple more. One, a pilot, and then two, a book I read that I think is interesting on here for the listeners. So one is a separate pilot. It's called Baby's First Years. And this pilot was 9 researchers did this. I don't know where they were from, but what they looked at was the question of if you give like basically low-income mothers different amounts of money, how does that impact the lives of their children? This is a multi-year study, and they're only, as of last month when I saw this, they're about a year in, so it's early. Mm-hmm. But what they did was they gave $333 per month to one group of mothers and $20 per month to another group of mothers, to say like, so they're giving money to both, but what is the difference in the kids' lives is what they're measuring.
Yeah.
So 1 year in, what they found was, and I don't know what's behind this, but 1 year in, they found that the people that were receiving $333 a month, their kids had more high frequency brain activity, right? So right, than the other mothers. That's like incredibly promising 1 year in, and also frightening because of how many like that the impact, right, that has.
It's incredibly frightening. And so anytime we talk about some variation of universal basic income and you can tie it to improved lives of young children, if you actually run through the ROI on that, it's off the charts. Like that is a no-brainer in terms of, gosh, one of our first episodes, Doogles, we talked about government spending money in a way that's a little more logical and concerned with return on investment. Improving the lives of young children, increasing high frequency brain activity, number of words they hear, nutrition levels, sleep, et cetera, the payback on that over the course of the next 18 to 20 years is typically massive. But for some reason, because that payback takes 20 years to show up, people have a hard time allocating resources that way.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And to your point earlier, just looking at more data, getting more data, and looking at more data around this to figure out how to do it, I think is really important. I'm actually going to drop 2 book recommendations, not one. Sorry, but you just made me think about a different one. So the one you just made me think about is a book called Scarcity. I may have brought that up on the pod before. I can't remember. But there's a book called Scarcity, and you can guess what it's about. If you can't, then, well, it's about scarcity. But what they look at is scarcity from a variety of different angles. But it's effectively like if someone doesn't have access to something, right? It's like something is scarce in their lives. It gives them tunnel vision. And so on the negative side of that, you're not able, like on the money side, you're not able to pay attention to other things like, how do I develop professionally? How do I thrive? Because you're trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
On the positive side of that, they're saying scarcity can also drive things like innovation, right? Because you're so tunnel vision, you're so focused that like, I have to get this thing done, like it will succeed. And so anyway, but it talks about scarcity. I think that's interesting. And you just made me think about it from the kid's angle. Even if you get beyond baby, right? If a kid is trying to be like, I gotta go to school. Then let's say you're 15 years old or so. I gotta hit work afterwards because, like now what are you not thinking about? Like, how do you blame that kid for not being able to get the same grades and not right? And it's a cascading compounding effect. So I think Scarcity, great book. Check it out. The other book, Good Economics for Hard Times. And this book, which I highly recommend, they talk about UBI, Universal Basic Income. And two of the one thing I just go read it because there's lots in here. But when they talk about UBI, they say that oftentimes the people that will most benefit from programs when they're rolled out at scale are the people that need it most.
Yeah. And
the 2 primary reasons they bring up about this are, they said, one, it's because they don't know about the program or they don't understand how to use it. And so they looked at some studies in here where they had, I'm going to call them navigators. That's not what they call them, but they like did control groups where someone was just like, let's say a mass, some kind of mass campaign went out talking about a program. Like that happens. Then you send out the mass campaign. You have people that like contact them and walk them through step by step how to use it. And it increases use like dramatically, right? Because you just don't understand either that it's for you, that it exists, or how to use it. The second a big reason is they said that many people self-exclude themselves. Like they're saying either I actually will be excluded, like I don't I don't deserve it, or I think one example they gave was I'm probably gonna have to bribe somebody like to make this work, like in the end, or like it's not for me, right, or whatever it might be. And so those are the two big reasons they gave. But
I think it also goes back to scarcity. Like they're probably worried about other things too, like paying the bills that week. So there's tunnel vision that's not focused on how do I solve this problem long term, or what possible resources are available for me. I mean, you can parallel some of that to the corporate world. Your rollout of major initiatives can be hindered greatly if you don't communicate and in some cases do some hand holding to get people on board with the change.
Yeah, change management is real. It is real. So couple book recommendations, and then guaranteed income, and is a difficult thing. I'm glad we're getting some more data on it.
Yeah, me too. How am I going to keep up with all these book recommendations, Doogles? I mean,
I don't know. Don't.
I only got time for one book a week, maybe two.
I like that we, as you mentioned, we share like some of the same, investment books, maybe, some of the same books, but we also read very different things. It's kind of cool. So, all right, dig in.
Can you drop a soundbite for me about Europe?
Oh, joy to the world, I tell you. Oh my goodness. When you sent this thing across to me this week, this is everything that is wrong with bubbles. Whether or not we're in one, question mark, not question mark.
I just want to listen.
Yeah, just listen. Sorry, just listen to this clip. Listen to this clip.
Europe, always a nightmare to do business. America's the only game in town. It's just us. You want to put $1 million to work, you're going to buy a bunch of European companies? Why? When you can buy Apple, you buy Disney, buy Netflix, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla, the king. It's the only game in town.
Tesla, the king.
I can't handle it. How did he attempt to say Nvidia? Did he say like?
I think he just said Nvidia. Like, I think he had to go in for fractional shares because couldn't get the whole share. So like the N.
Did he get the N on the front?
The N was dropped.
I mean,
it's also the like if you just hear the tone of this video and just see it, you would not be thinking about he's talking about what he's talking about. Like he says this as if it's like absolute gospel here. Like
you can't.
Why?
Nowhere else in the world can you make money, and it doesn't matter that the U.S. stock market is the second most expensive in the world, and places like the U.K. are dirt cheap and primed to outperform. I mean, because according to Doogles' hogwash, mean reversion doesn't exist. So yeah. But like the tone in that is so interesting. Like, and this conviction, how, why, like, why would we be the only place on earth that's allowed to make money? Does that make any sense?
I mean, it does from like an ethnocentric, like America view, but it is the questions you just raised, like, is what gets to me. It's as if he sees someone that's about to purchase a value stock not in the US, and he goes, whoa, did you know you could buy Apple,
Tesla,
Amazon?
Tesla.
Wait, I can? It's like they didn't know, like they only realized that they could get into UK grocery stores, like that's all they thought. They were like, oh, Tesco, no, Tesla, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just put an A on the end. Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, does he know? I'm just gonna ask a question or two. Like, Does he know that the Japan stock market was like 44% of the world market capitalization in 1989, and that did not mean that Japan was the only place to invest for the rest of your life? Like, that was a good time to invest in America.
If you ended that question with "Does he know?" I'd go no. Like no matter what else. This takes us back. Remember the clip that we played a few months ago with the guy that was talking about Upstart? And they said,
Yeah.
what do they do? And these, if you go to, I'd say maybe I'm not gonna go as far as say the average American, because I don't know, but probably the average American, at least the average investor, and ask what these companies do, they probably know. If you go to him and go, what does Tesla do? He'd probably be like, you're breaking up. I think I'm having audio issues. This is dangerous, like just dangerous in my mind. I tell you that much.
I mean, we need more sound bites. The show would be more popular if I made up ridiculous claims and we threw them on the social medias.
Here, what to grab onto this thread though, the European value piece is I've been trying to, like, off and on throughout the last 12 months, basically, been trying to figure out if I were to get into European value, like what would be the best ways. And I haven't found any good avenues, mostly because, like, I think if you, for investment firms that are investing in the country in value, it becomes a lot easier. But I've been looking at things that are traded, like either individual stocks or otherwise, that are traded on the US markets that also are good representations of European value. I haven't been able to find a lot. I don't know if you have looked or
I
found
did
anything.
a cursory look too and didn't find anything that screamed. But we have a really smart listener in Paris who does some value stuff, and I forget his name at the moment. But if I can send a listener shout out, if you can shoot us some good European value recommendations to the mailbox at Skippy Doogles, or DM on Twitter at Skippy Doogles, or hit Gmail, skippydoogles@gmail.com. It'd be appreciated, because I know there's a bunch of guys in Europe that probably know this better than we do.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's US traded, like, European stocks, I think. And it part of it might be that like, there's a very strong chance, because this is not my world, that I just don't know about them. Like, that's probably like one. Two is I'm curious as to whether the European markets are mature enough that some companies just don't end up coming over here to trade. Whereas in some of the places, like when I'm trying to buy like a Brazilian stock, right, or even China hasn't had as mature of a market outside of Hong Kong, right, before, and so they've come over to trade in the US. I wonder how much this isn't traded here too. But anyway, yeah, shout out there, because it'd be great to get some research recommendations.
I did spend a little bit of time on, like, trying to buy value-based FTSE 100 or some of that stuff, or the Euro 600, and there's some stuff, but nothing that really satisfied my needs. To your point, the global X ETFs, sorry, I'm like deep in the weeds. A lot of times we'll go to these emerging markets and have there's like a Greece ETF, right? But it seemed like that was less prevalent for some of the more developed markets in the UK, and it probably just means I missed it.
Well,
UK
especially
and, like,
when you
Germany
get
and
down
stuff.
to value, because one of the things I did was I looked at we are very much in the weeds, but enjoy, because it's about to happen. I would look at, was it Franklin Templeton, I think, has a UK ETF. There are a couple of UK ETFs. So I went in there and looked at the ETF itself and said, I'm not interested in the whole UK market like that. I don't want the S&P 500 of the UK. So then I went to their holdings and looked at, like, what do you hold, and started trying to figure out if they traded in the US, and like they most of them didn't. You get some of, like, large pharma and stuff, but I know there's got to be something out there. I'm not familiar with, but but I've tried to do that too. Come on, European value, come to me. I'm like the opposite of this individual here, right? Come to me, European value, come to me.
Well, to put a bow on that, like, I've said this 3 weeks in a row. I love people talking trash about my stock picks. I love people getting on their soapbox and screaming, "Don't you dare put your money outside the U.S. because the majority of my money right now." Well, is that true? In like a retirement account where I can't pick individual stocks, the majority of my money is outside the U.S. So I'm there because it's cheap, and I'm happy with everyone else waking up to that down the line.
I'm going to set this as actually my alarm clock from now on. So I want to wake up to this guy saying Tesla.
I want to pull something out of the fishbowl just to put a bow on something we've been talking about for a long time. It sounds like maybe this would be way too logical, so I don't want to get your hopes up. Congress might move towards banning their members of trading stocks.
Why wouldn't you?
They just should.
Like I enjoyed the argument. Thanks for bringing this up, because I wasn't thinking about bringing this up today. I enjoyed the argument of the answer to my question of why wouldn't you, as we will decrease the quality of talent that we can get in Congress. First of all, show me the quality of talent that we got right now. Like, so step one, show me the quality of talent.
It's tough to decrease the quality of talent.
Yeah. Like, why wouldn't we? And it goes back, we brought this up a couple times to when we had James McIntosh on the show, and he was like, as a journalist, he's like, obviously I can't sacrifice integrity to trade individual stocks, but you have someone that's writing laws. There was a survey. Sorry, I'm like jumping in here, but I get
this is great. This is important stuff.
So there was a survey where something like 75% of people said that they believe that people in Congress should not be able to trade stocks because they have an advantage in the stock market.
Yeah.
And to me, that, like, I will say true, and that misses the point. They are like writing the laws of the country. Like, whether or not they have an advantage in the stock market over me, I'm indifferent toward, to be honest. I am not indifferent toward them shaping the legislation of the US based on their financial interests. Like, and not one person can't necessarily do that individually, but some folks have some power.
To be clear, I'm not okay with either of those things. There's no reason they should have material non-public information, or however you want to classify it, that gives them an advantage over me, because that's ridiculous. But then, yes, they're going to naturally throw paragraphs and sentences in that say, I hold this many million of X company, and they make more profits if we adjust this legislation. So you're bound to craft legislation to make personal gains for them, which is also not why they're supposed to be making laws.
It's ridiculous.
It's really ridiculous, and it should be fixed already. And to go back to James McIntosh, right? Journalist for 20 some years, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, clearly, like, very popular journalist too, very influential. And he came on the show and said, sometimes I write breakdowns that I know will effectively move markets. That's not his exact quote, but he's like, I work on a piece and I know that there will probably be some reaction to that piece, and I would never purchase, like, front run the stock. Like, that's unethical and illegal in my profession, and we can't even ask our lawmakers to follow the same code of ethics as him. I mean,
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And going back to the talent piece too, something as I was looking at all this stuff that came to mind for me is I went, maybe that's good. Not having different talent, I do think is good, but also there have been discussions around whether or not there should be, like, cap term limits, so people aren't sitting in Congress for like 40 years.
Yeah.
I bet you that, and I don't know whether that's good or bad. I'm not a political scientist or whatever, right? But I'll say that I bet you that if financial gain while in seat is restricted, that peeps would not be sitting up in there for like 40, 50 years, right? If you weren't able to do some of this stuff. And I think that there's possibly secondary benefit to that kind of thing.
Yeah. And for those who don't want to go find the previous episode on this, I mean, go on any social media and Google Nancy Pelosi stock picks, and there's going to be some account that tells you what her husband trades based on her information. And it happens on all sides of the aisle. It's not just Nancy, but, like, this is a real thing where people trade on their information because they clearly believe that there's inside information there.
What was that? It was either a insight or it was a Twitter handle, something like Nancy Pelosi is the whale, like, was like the name.
It's something like that.
It's pretty great.
No, there's a bunch of them. That's what I'm saying. Just
there are a bunch of them.
Go check it out. Now, don't trade based on their picks, or at least that's my recommendation. But know that this is a thing, and it needs to be rectified.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to dive in for a quick hit here. which is about year-to-date performance for stocks in general, what's getting hit, what's getting not, because we've touched on that a good amount. Anyone that's following the markets this year in any depth knows that financials and energy are like what's hot right now. I think there are only actually two sectors that are in the green this year, and those are the two sectors, like as a whole.
Yeah.
And so we know that. But for me, it didn't really click until last week. I was looking at the every Saturday, StockTwits comes out with their top 25 of the S&P 500. So top 25 best performers, the S&P 500. I was looking at this last week, and holy moly jolly, this is like all energy and financials. So there were two organizations on here that were not, I think at last I looked, this might be wrong, but something like that, right? One was Activision Blizzard because of the takeover, basically. Yeah. It popped up. Otherwise, it would not have been on here. And the other was Las Vegas Sands. So casino. And that there also might have been a takeover there. Who knows? But anyway, but otherwise, you got all these energy companies and financials. And guess what's on the top of the list?
Oxy.
That's right. Oxy, which Skippy convinced me not to buy about 2 years ago.
But hey, shout out to my boy Jeff at Oxy. So Oxy, Carl Icon's in there trying to do some activist stuff. I went through it, man. It just had too much debt for me, but it was cheap. It was intriguing. I'm not surprised it's at the top of this list.
I'm swinging my finger at you about you stopping me, but we've talked about this separately, and actually it was the right move. Like I think the walkthrough that you gave to me was the right move, because it was kind of like you were basically taking the Dundo investor approach, where because you brought up how you bought Exxon and I think maybe another one a while ago, and the conversation you were having with me was one where like Exxon Dundo investor, sorry, it's Monish Pabrai's whole thing, which is basically it's like heads you win, tails you don't lose much is like his philosophy. And that was like when you were talking to me about Exxon, it might've been Chevron or others. And you were saying, you're like, oil gonna do great things, right? Probably like at least the market's set up so it very well could. And it's so cheap that like the downside is pretty well protected and there's upside. Whereas when I was throwing Oxy your way, not the drug, the the stock here, when I was throwing Oxy your way, you're like, also upside, downside is zero, like less, legitimately like potentially zero. So I still appreciate that walkthrough. I was just giving you a hard time, but this is wild to look at this list.
It really is crazy. So here's a few names on the list, guys. Oxy, Halliburton, Exxon, Marathon Oil, Hess, ConocoPhillips, Pioneer Natural Resources, Discovery, Phillips 66, Diamondback Energy, Marathon Petroleum. It goes on. I mean, but Doogles, oil's at 8-year highs, and 2 years ago it was negative or very close to zero, depending on how you do the accounting. This was a no-brainer of a trade. Like it just was. And I'm happy I rode. I'm happy I rode this wave.
It's good work for you. One other quick hit that you just reminded me of before we see what's next in your fishbowl, going from negative to positive, is this. The European bond market got hit this week. And so I'm reading this article about it. It's because the European Central Bank has like a sudden change of heart, according to the market, as to raising interest rates. So I'm like, okay, that happens. But I'd forgotten that when they were mentioning what they were raising from, it was negative 0.5%. I was like, all right. Like it's kind of, there's such it's interesting to me that when we talk about raising interest rates and the impact that's going to have, and I do believe it will at some point have an impact, right, on things like earnings and debt and all that stuff. I do believe that. But when we talk about it, we forget that like before when we raise interest rates, it was like raising interest rates to 5%, 6%, right? When you're talking raising interest rates from negative 0.5 to like 0.5, I mean, that's still, you still have no interest. Like there's not, anyway, but I just think it's really interesting. Our perspective is very different these days with regard to both inflation and interest.
Yep. And we went deep down the rabbit hole. If you guys haven't heard the James McIntosh conversation, he had one of the most fascinating articles I've read this year, which was about if government currency goes fully digital, what that might mean to the movement of rates on to a far negative side. Because right now, if rates get too low, people are bound to take too low negative. People are bound to take their money out of the bank and hold physical cash because at least it isn't decreasing in value. If there was effectively very little to no cold hard cash, it could change the dynamics of how all those equations work, and you could make rates go largely negative, which would encourage people to spend even more rapidly, because if you're sitting in a bank, it's losing money. So if you want to go deep into the rabbit hole, we have done that for you to mix reviews.
Enjoy.
Let's see, Doogles. Should we talk Spotify?
Yeah, we get on Spotify.
This is just one. Spotify's been in the news. The Hustle, again, courageous journalism right here, broke down some stuff. U.S. recorded music revenues. When did it peak, Doogles? You got to guess?
14.
That was the low, was 14.
Oh, the peak 99. Sorry.
99 was the high, right? What's going on in 99? Was like the Microsoft Zune out? I mean,
yeah.
No, actually, it wasn't even out yet. That was on the decline. Like,
it wasn't.
Was the iPod even out? Probably not.
No, I don't even think it was anything. It was more of, I think 99 was more the peak, not because of something led to the rise, but because Napster led to the decline. I think that's more of what it was.
That's fair to say. Well, what I'm getting at is 99, the peak is probably actually going to like Tower Records and buying CDs. And then there became an alternative to that. So we went from 23 billion in revenue in 99 all the way down to 7 billion in 2004. That's the bottom of the trough, and that's Napster, streaming, illegal downloading, everything else. The music industry really trying to find their way. Since the 2004 trough, that's what gave the music industry desire to work with streaming services like Spotify. So that effectively is like the birth of their business model, where they say, we can share some of these revenues with you. If we don't make it easy for people to stream whatever they want, they're gonna illegally download whatever they want. So it's like the rebirth of the music industry from a revenue perspective. At least that's what I'm trying to articulate here. In terms of the global streaming landscape by paid subscribers, Spotify is the largest, and it's twice as large as anything else. It's 31% of the global subscription market, followed by Apple Music at 15%, Amazon Music at 13%, and then you have things like Tencent Music and YouTube Music, and then a bunch of tiny little ones.
I didn't realize quite how large Spotify had gotten. And I also didn't realize that which I think you're probably about to get to, when you look at their payout ratio compared to others, to artists, how far behind they are from other folks. And speaking of Napster, this blew my mental capacities out the wahizi, that the number one from an average artist payout per 1,000 streams, right? The number one platform is Napster to pay out artists, $9.16. Spotify falls down at number 6 at $3.48, with Tidal, Apple, Deezer, and Amazon in between. Who would have thought?
Well, it's crazy because I think of some reason I think of these royalty payouts, or I feel like they should be structured like a credit card transaction fee or something. And there's like this going rate, like it's 2%. Well, it's not that way at all. As you just mentioned, like if someone streams on Apple Music, they get paid twice as much as if you stream the exact same song on Spotify. And I don't claim to be an expert here. I believe that's because of all these are individually negotiated contracts pretty much with the music companies. And of course, Spotify has economies of scale, so they probably get wholesale discounts on their pricing. But it's really interesting how fragmented and different the market is here.
It is. And you have there's the record label payout and the publisher payout separately. And the artist ends up, I mean, unless you're one of the tippity tops, the artist ends up just getting pretty squeezed in this whole process. One of the data points they dropped is only 2% of Spotify artists earn more than $1,000 per year.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is not a lot of percent.
So basically 98% of all your artists on Spotify, the world's largest streaming platforms, make less than enough money to buy a new phone. I mean, like, it's not grocery money even. It's nothing.
It's meaningless.
Yeah.
Like it's Spotify is effectively is just like meaningless. And
it's like Napster. It's free.
Yeah. And as you alluded to, but didn't mention explicitly before, a lot of where this is coming from right now is the Joe Rogan controversy, because folks are saying some version of Joe Rogan is spouting off at the mouth, right? According to what they're saying, like he's saying a lot of misinformation about COVID. There were some racial slurs people brought up, and saying Spotify, you're paying him $100 million a year, like to do this, and I'm India Ari, and you're not paying me anything. Which I hadn't thought about India Ari in quite a while, but it was great to see her name pop up. But that's kind of what they're saying. They're like, why are you spending all this money there, and you're not paying out the artists who are making your platform from their viewpoint? Podcasts also making their platform, right now. But that's where a lot of this is coming from.
So this is wholesale transfer pricing, and the problem with being a distribution platform. We talked about platforms a while back too, Doogles, right? So Spotify has invested almost $1 billion recently in podcasting acquisitions, from The Ringer to Joe Rogan to Gimlet to Megaphone, because they want to own more of the content. And if you own more of the content, you have some more control over the transfer pricing, and then you hope people pay your subscription fees to get the content you own, like the podcast, rather than the content you don't, like the music. It's funny to me, well, not funny, but it's interesting that they didn't do the same push with creating new music. Their push to own content has largely been in the podcasting space.
It's probably easier, I'd assume, because music is like I guess they're both hit-driven businesses, but you can see what the hit is. Like music, you can't buy on the other side, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't, right, necessarily. I guess they could become like a record label of sorts or something like that, but that starts to get buck wild.
Apparently, but
it
that also seems to imply that you think the voices in podcasting that are relevant stick around for a longer period of time. Maybe there's less variability through that. Anyway, we'll put this article on the Twitter. I think it's just a fascinating breakdown of their business model, and it should make you think.
That it does. Is that a wrap?
That's it, guys. Hey, hit us on supercast.skippydoogles if you want to become a premium member to the show, get episodes early and other premium content. We appreciate that. There's also a one-stop shop to find us, our Twitter, our Gmail, everything else, skippydoogles.com.
Thank you. And always rate and review. We love it. Helps people come. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.